Hi, I am Mother Mary, and I talk about issues related to justice in Alaska, in America, and in the world. Alaska is facing a constitutional crisis that most people haven't even heard of. It's a story involving a tased bush pilot, a retired judge indicted for perjury, and a high stakes battle between the Alaska Supreme Court and the people. At the heart of this conflict is a single sentence in the Alaska Constitution. The power of grand juries to investigate and make recommendations shall never be suspended. But between 2021 and 2023, many Alaskans believe that is exactly what happened. Today, we're looking at the explosive timeline of how the state's judicial system allegedly moved to shut down a citizen-led investigation into judicial corruption. Our story centers on David Haig, a man who has spent nearly 20 years alleging that his 2004 hunting conviction was the result of a corrupt conspiracy between a judge and a state trooper. For years, the system ignored him, but in 2021 and early 2022, something changed. Haig and a group of activists began organizing massive protests outside of the Kenai, Alaska courthouse. They weren't just shouting, they were educating the public on an ancient power, the right of any citizen to ask a grand jury to investigate government misconduct. By May of 2022, the pressure worked. Alaska's judicial system agreed to let a grand jury in Kenai hear Haig's evidence. For the first time in decades, the sword and the shield of the people was being unsheathed to look at the judiciary itself. The Kenai Grand Jury didn't just listen, they acted. They began subpoenaing high-ranking officials, including judges and Marla Greenstein, the woman who is still the only investigator of all Alaska judges since 1989. But as the grand jury closed in, the Alaska Supreme Court made a move that shocked legal observers. In November 2022, the Supreme Court issued Supreme Court Order 1993. This changed the rules of the game while the game was still being played. This order stated that citizens couldn't go directly to a grand jury. They must first get government approval. And the new rules allowed judges to seal grand jury reports and recommendations before the public could see them. According to Supreme Court internal memos, they even bypassed their own 13-member Rules Committee to rush this through. To the protesters, this was a silent coup, a direct attempt to strip the grand jury of its independent power to investigate and make recommendations concerning judges. Despite the new rules, the Kenai Grand Jury managed to strike two final blows. First, they indicted retired Judge Margaret Murphy on a felony charge of perjury. This was the first time in Alaska's history that a grand jury, pushed by citizen advocacy, had indicted a judge for conduct related to a corruption cover-up. Long ago, Judge Murphy had presided over Haig's trial. Second, after Greenstein lawyered up and refused to testify, the grand jury wrote a report and recommendations considering the evidence she was falsifying official investigations to cover up for corrupt judges, possibly for decades. But the victory was short-lived. Throughout 2023, the judicial system fought back. It argued Judge Murphy's indictment was flawed because a grand juror went missing just after the vote to indict, and thus the jury no longer had the required 12 jurors. By early 2024, a judge tossed out the indictment entirely, citing the lack of a quorum and the still missing juror. Then the same judge, without giving a reason, sealed the grand jury report and recommendations. To the state, this was about following proper procedure, but to the activist, it was a masterclass in how a system protects its own by abusing rules to suspend the power of the people. So where does that leave us? The Alaska court system maintains that these new rules actually create a formal process for citizens. But critics argue the opposite, that the system has successfully gatekept the grand jury, ensuring that no investigation into judicial corruption can ever happen without the judiciary's permission. And if one does take place, Anything embarrassing to judges themselves can simply be sealed. The Constitution says this power shall never be suspended. After the events of 2021 to 2023, the question for Alaskans is, has that promise been broken? If you want to see the documents and the full timeline for yourself, the link to Alaska State of Corruption articles is in the description box below. Thank you for your listening. If you are interested in this type of content, please hit the like, share, and subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.